Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here, and I just got done seeing Spider-Man: Homecoming, which I'll admit has probably been my least anticipated comic book movie of the year. Not to say that I haven't been looking forward to it or anything like that. It's just I think after having 5 Spider-Man movies prior to this and Civil War, I don't know, a little Spider-Man'd out a bit. Even though I did really like Tom Holland in Civil War. Because I do think they really did a good job of finding a good actor to play both Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because even though I really like the Tobey Maguire movies, or the first two, I think he was a better Peter Parker than he was a Spider-Man, and then with Andrew Garfield, I thought he was a better Spider-Man than he was Peter Parker. But I think Tom Holland is a good blend of the two. I think he plays Spider-Man and Peter Parker both really well. And I really liked how this movie almost felt like a kind of John Hughes coming-of-age movie that just happens to be set in the Marvel Universe, where people have superpowers and all that craziness. So, yeah, more reason why the Marvel Universe keep making movies that they're comic book movies and they're superhero movies, but they also have more. They're more than just that kind of genre of movie. They have, subgenres built in within the superhero genre. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Marvel have just been knocking that out of the park consistently with their movies. And especially with this movie, I'm really glad that, and a lot of this is probably due to Marvel being kind of taking the reins on this rather than Sony, is they didn't make the same mistakes that the other, because the first 2 Spider-Man movies, again, with Tobey Maguire, I think are fantastic. Third one, not so much. And then, even though I like the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, it's still maybe a bit more, I don't know, formulaic, I guess. It just kind of felt kind of by the numbers, and then the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is just not very good at all. So, I like that they kept this movie very refreshing. It didn't just feel like another, I don't know, and especially with the fact that I guess you could say that there were 3 villains in this movie, which, honestly, when I first started to hear that they were casting all these villains, I was getting a little worried. But that really worked out. Michael Keaton is fantastic. I am so glad that he ended up accepting the role, because I know initially he was in talks and then, I guess, backed out for a little bit, and then maybe he changed his mind, or maybe Marvel just dumped a sack of money onto his front yard in a dump truck, were like, here you go, play the Vulture. Regardless of the situation and why he decided to, I'm glad, because Michael Keaton is a fantastic actor, and he really brought a whole lot of gravitas to the role of the Vulture, and just as a villain, because Marvel has not had really any good villains in the movies, aside from Loki. So the fact that Michael Keaton was able to really bring a lot more to the character, is especially something like a lesser-known character like the Vulture, where, your average moviegoer probably has no knowledge of Vulture whatsoever. And I actually really like the fact that they had Vulture as the villain, because the Vulture was the first villain that popped up in the Spider-Man comics. So I think that's a great first villain, especially for Homecoming, very fitting. And really my only minor nitpick with Michael Keaton is the Vulture. And again, it's very minor just because I feel like most superhero movies a lot of the villains are like this, where, Michael Keaton's character starts off as just kind of like your everyday man. He's just trying to make a living. And then, because basically he runs this company where they're cleaning up the mess after the Chitauri invasion in New York. And then in Stark Industries and Damage Control come in to kind of be like, hey, look, we're in control of this. You guys, sorry about your luck. So he has a bit of a grievance with Tony Stark and Damage Control, because they basically put him out of business. Which makes sense. It gives him a little bit of motivation for kind of wanting to not necessarily kind of go to committing crimes, but at least gives him enough motivation to kind of put him up there a little bit, a much higher step above than some of the other kind of cookie-cutter villains we've got in the Marvel Universe, where they just show up and they're like, I'm the bad guy because the script says so, and that's it. They have no development or even their motivations. You're kind of like, why are they doing this? aside from them being the bad guy. Whereas at least in this, they gave him enough to where you can at least kind of see where he's coming from. You get his motives to a degree, and he isn't just like a cookie cutter kind of cardboard cutout villain they just kind of toss him aside once he's defeated. So that's what I really liked about Michael Keaton. That's what I really liked. But again, that was kind of really my only nitpick is he goes from your everyday guy to a villain, and again, I get that there's only so much screen time you can give characters in like a 2-hour movie, and especially the villains. I get the main focus is the heroes, but there's a scene, minor spoilers, where he kills someone, and granted, it's not. He's using some of the alien technology that they're using to make like some of their gear, like his vulture suit and all that. So he shoots this guy with this gun that he thinks is an anti-gravity gun to, I guess, kind of teach him a lesson and make him float in the air or something like that. It ends up vaporizing him, and he dies. He doesn't seem all that kind of upset that he just killed somebody, even though he's maybe not the most outstanding citizen. But it's still the fact that he just killed someone, and he was just kind of like, I thought that was the anti-gravity gun. And then that he doesn't really seem to care that he just killed someone. And later on, he is very menacing. And again, that's one thing that I really like about Michael Keaton, is he is very menacing, and that's something that's been missing from the other Marvel villains, is even the ones that they're like, they have this big world-ending threat, for whatever reason they're trying to blow up the world or take it over or whatever, they just don't seem that menacing, just because again there isn't enough to them to make them all that menacing, aside from the fact that it's like, I'm the bad guy, I'm gonna blow up the world, or whatever their motivation is. Whereas at least he's very menacing, but I just feel like the jump from him being like your everyday kind of working class guy to willing to kill people, I feel like was a little, I don't know, I feel like that kind of transition was a little fast. But that's really my only minor nitpick with Michael Keaton as the Vulture, and that really has nothing to do with his performance. It's just, but again, I get that it was just kind of a natural thing where they had to make him more villainous and all that. So again, minor nitpick, but and Bokeem Woodbine is the Shocker. I thought he did good for the little he's in the movie, and I forget the actor's name who played the Tinkerer. So I think they did a good enough job with balancing the villains. Yeah, obviously Michael Keaton's a headlining villain, but Shocker is kind of working with the Vulture, same with Tinkerer. So I think they did a good enough job with kind of setting up these other little villains, and also something that I thought was really cool, that I think, pretty sure, because it's Marvel and they don't just lay Easter eggs in front of us for the hell of it. They usually have some bigger purpose or bigger meaning. The character Mac Gargan shows up and has a little tattoo of a scorpion on his neck. I thought that was really cool, that they might use the scorpion at some point in a Spider-Man movie. And I guess that's a sort of minor spoiler, but nothing too major. If for those of you who are watching this that haven't seen the movie yet. Again, it's not really that big of a spoiler, and again, he's only in like 2 scenes, so it's not like his character has a big impact on the movie. It's just, I just like the fact that another Spider-Man rogue villain, because that's the thing with Spider-Man, him and Batman probably have the best rogues gallery in all of comics. So I like the fact that they were able to incorporate multiple villains of Spider-Man's rogue gallery without kind of bogging down the story and without kind of taking away screen time from Michael Keaton as the Vulture. And again, I'm really curious to see if they utilize Mac Gargan as the Scorpion later on, or if that's just fan service, which if that's the case, that's totally fine. And I'd be okay with that, because Scorpion he's kind of a lower tier villain, and I think if they do use him, it'd be cool to see in like the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, where at the beginning of the movie, Spider-Man's fighting him, he beats him up and sends him back to prison or something like that, just as like a cool showing that Spider-Man's, he's still being Spider-Man, saving the day and all that stuff, but he is mostly a street level hero, even though he can play with the big boys, the Avengers, as we saw in Civil War. And that's one thing that I've always liked about Spider-Man, is even though he's more of a street level in terms of he just prefers to keep to his little neighborhood, his little corner in New York, he can play with, the Avengers and hold his own against them. So that's one thing that I do really like about Spider-Man, and one thing that I like about this movie is it shows that he does want to be bigger and he does want to be, with the Avengers, but in the end he kind of realizes that he kind of prefers to just keep to his little corner towards the end. And I think that's how it should be. Like, obviously, he can show up in, the future Avengers movies and help them out and team up with them, but I don't think he needs to be a major character in future Avengers movies. And I think they've even stated that he is going to have about the same amount of screen time in Avengers Infinity War as he did in Civil War, which I think is fine. Like, you don't need him to be stealing the show or anything like that. So, I'm really, really excited to see him in not only the Avengers movies, but also in the next Spider-Man film, because I think they finally got Spider-Man right. Like, tone, the Tom Holland I think is a fantastic choice. Just everything I think about this movie was something we've been missing from previous Spider-Man films. And even though I still have to rewatch them, but I still think I might like the first two Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire just a little bit more. But I would say, as a whole, this is probably one of the best Spider-Man movies. So, overall, this is a really good movie, a nice addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's probably not going to be in my top 5 Marvel movies, definitely not my top 5. Maybe I don't know. I'd probably have to, look at all the Marvel movies and kind of compare again to see whether it'd even make my top 10. But it's definitely in the kind of upper tier of the Marvel movies, for sure. Mostly just because a lot of that has to do with Michael Keaton as the villain, which really elevates the movie. Because if they had used them as a one-and-done villain or cast another actor as Michael Keaton, I don't think this would have... the movie still would have been good, but I don't think it would have been as good as it is, because that's part of the thing that makes a lot of movies, especially comic book movies, good, is the heroes are only as good as their villains. And that's one thing that I really liked about the first two Spider-Man movies, is Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin and Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus. I thought were fantastic, and their relationship with Spider-Man is another thing that made those movies really work. And not to really spoil it, but there is a relationship that Spider-Man and the Vulture have in this movie that kind of, not near to the extent as what Peter had with Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus in the first two Spider-Man movies, but they do, kind of hard to explain without spoiling anything, but they do kind of have a relationship that kind of makes it a bit more personal, and they're not just going against each other because Spider-Man's a good guy and he's the bad guy. So that's another thing that I really liked about this movie, is they are kind of hearkening back to what worked in some of the previous Spider-Man movies, is he has to have some kind of connection with his villains, just in me personally, to make it really work and make it more impactful. And that's one thing that, again, with Spider-Man's villains, is a lot of them he has some kind of personal connection to. Like, again, Green Goblin is Harry Osborn, his best friend's dad. Dr. Octopus was his former teacher. So, several of his villains he has some kind of pre-existing relationship with, or some kind of connection with, that makes it more impactful when they do fight each other. So, again, there wasn't a whole lot, again, just in comparison with the other movies and villains, but enough to, again, just kind of help elevate it and just really make Michael Keaton's role more impactful. Hey, Keaton. So, yeah, overall, I would say this... Actually, another thing I want to point out before I start wrapping this up is the soundtrack. A lot of Marvel movies have not really had a really distinguishable soundtrack. They all just kind of... they're just very kind of bland. Nothing really stands out about them. One thing that I really liked about this is the beginning. Like, after the cold open, we see, the Marvel opening with all the characters and all that stuff. I like that they kind of have a... They take the classic Spider-Man theme song, but they change it up a little bit just to kind of pay homage, but, keep it nice and updated. But also, just the overall score for the movie, I thought, was pretty good. It fit the tone, and it fit just everything about the movie. And I really hope that this is kind of a trend now with Marvel, because I've noticed that Doctor Strange had a really good soundtrack as well, also done by Michael Giacchino, I think is how you pronounce his name. So hopefully they keep him on board to score, probably not all the movies, because that's asking a lot of one person. But hopefully they'll at least keep him on board for a few other movies, like maybe Infinity War and Avengers 4. So hopefully, like, at least for some of the bigger Marvel movies, they'll keep him on board, or at least on standby to help score the movies. Because that's another thing that's been missing with a lot of the Marvel movies is lack of villains and lack of a really good score. Because say what you want about the DC movies, they have really good scores. Like Man of Steel, Hans Zimmer did a fantastic job. He also did really good with Batman v Superman. So, and just in general, the DC movies I feel like have had a lot better soundtracks. You know, John Williams did the Superman movies, or the original Superman movies. So, hopefully Marvel have kind of been realizing, hey, we need, like, these are iconic heroes. They should have themes and, like, a more distinguishable soundtrack, and it's not just kind of like this just background noise, really. But, you know, we'll see where it goes, but that's just me hoping, because I'm a big music person. I like when a soundtrack really helps enhance a movie. And this one, really, you know, it's not like Lord of the Rings scale, like Howard Shore or the John Williams type score for a movie, but it definitely helps the movie stand out and elevate it a lot more from, again, other superhero movies, or in particular MCU movies, where again there's just not much of a score, or at least anything again distinguishable. So, but overall, I would say it's definitely better than the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I might still have to rewatch the first two Spider-Man movies to really definitively say which is the best, but I think I still might like the first two Tobey Maguire movies just a little bit more. But other than that, Spider-Man Homecoming, I think, is a fantastic movie. It's a great addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and gives me a lot of hope that they'll actually continue to do Spider-Man justice, and they won't screw up like they've done with previous Spider-Man movies. So that wraps up this review. Hopefully you all have enjoyed, and hopefully you enjoyed the movie. If you did, let me know what you think in the comments below. And we're near 200 subscribers here at Pasty Pale Productions, so help us out, get to 200 subscribers by the end of the year, and we'll do like a event of some kind, like a live stream or something like that, and I don't know, I guess show our appreciation for you all for supporting us after all this time. So keep liking, commenting, subscribing, all that stuff, and you can like us on Facebook at Pasty Pale Productions. You can follow us on Twitter at PastyPalePro. You can follow me on Twitter at IrishmanJake. And you can also check out my podcast, Shogun's Gateway to Anime, which is all about anime. I'll also leave a link to Reverend Spaceman's channel, where you can check out his podcast and all his videos, and Jordan's podcast, Mild-Mannered Movie Men. You can find that and Shogun's Gateway to Anime both on Podbean and iTunes. So that wraps this video up. Until next time, everyone, cheers.